Good morning, guys. What's up? Today we're going to be working on the Subaru. I've been having some issues with binding in the rear axles, so we are actually upgrading them to some track motive heavy duty axles. So these are their axles that we're going to be using to put into the car. They're supposed to be extended travel. Since the Subaru is lifted, it should work a lot better when we go off-roading. So these are the new axles we're going to be using from Track Motive. And once I remove the stock one, I'll show you side-by-side comparison of what it looks like. And I figured that while we're going to be in there, we're also going to be changing out the wheel bearing and the brake shoes, because yes, the Subaru OBS wagon has brake drums in the rear instead of discs, which hopefully in the future I'm going to be upgrading to discs. But for now, you know, I'm already going to be in there, so I might as well change everything out to brand new. So the reason why we're changing them out is because we are going to be lifting the Subaru an extra 2 inches apart from the 2 inches that we got from the Forester struts and springs. And I just don't want to have any binding issues when we do that, so we're going to be taking that precaution now rather than lift it, have the problem, and then have to fix it later. So we're pretty much just going to remove the whole knuckle. We're going to remove the brake drum, change the brakes. We're going to remove the axle, replace it with a new one, and then we're also going to be redoing the wheel bearing. That way we don't have any issues with the new axles. Alright, so this is where the fun part begins. So what you're going to want to do is take a picture or a video of this setup. That way you know exactly how it's supposed to go back in. I've done this a couple of times already on other cars, so I'm kind of familiar with it. But if you're not, make sure you document it, take pictures, whatever you need to do, or use this video as a reference. So now that you have all of your brake components out of the way, we can start removing everything else that's holding the knuckle onto the axle and the control arms and whatnot, so that we can continue on to the next step, which is removing the axle and getting to those bearings. So once you have it all apart and you have the spindle out with the knuckle, you got to clean all of this grease out of here as much as you can until you find the little clip that you can see kind of right there. And once you get that clip, once you can see it, you'll see that it's in a groove that's holding the actual housing of the bearings inside of here. And then we'll continue to use the hydraulic press to push that out of there once we get that clip off. So you're going to take your screwdriver and you're going to put it right here where that little gap is, right there. And now you got to make sure that you don't actually harm where the bearing is going to go in. So you got to be very careful that you don't damage it. So here's my hydraulic press setup. 12 tons from Harbor Freight. It was like around maybe 80-100 bucks, but believe me, it's already paid for itself. And so all you do is you set your part on there, and then you find something like a socket. In this case, I'm going to be using a socket that goes perfectly in there and matches up with the inner race. That way you can you know, you can push it out. And so I'll show you here. Tighten this up. And all you do is pump it up until it gets pretty close to touching. That way you can make sure it's completely centered. And then you just pump it down, and you'll see that it'll start pushing it. And there you go. The old bearing is now out. So here's the old bearing. So once you get your new bearing in, all the way seated down to the bottom, you can proceed to put the clip back in. And I'll see if I can do it one-handed. If not, I'm gonna have to put the camera down. Nope. Alright. So once the clip is inside, as you can see here, it is now ready to hold your race in place, or your bearing. And now we can go ahead and put on the front seal. Alright, so now that we got the new seals, front and back, it is time to put this bad boy back onto the car. So as you can see, here is our stock Subaru axle compared to the new one. And from the looks of it, the cups are different. So I'm assuming that this is where all the extra travel comes from. And then it has this piece here, which I'm not sure what it is, but the stock one doesn't have this big piece. It looks to be about the same thickness, maybe slightly smaller. But other than that, it does look a little beefier. And it is supposed to give us a lot more travel when we're off-roading. You know, the suspension, since it's lifted, it won't bind, and then we're going to add another 2 inches to it, so hopefully we won't have any issues. And if these work out fine, then we're going to change out the front ones too. So we changed out the seal on the differential to make sure that it was going to seal properly and we weren't going to have any leaks with the new axle. And now it's time to install the new axle. Alright, so now we have our new axle in. Everything is on there, kind of finger tight, just to make sure that we could put the spindle back in. We have our nut torqued down to spec with the little piece in here already punched in, that way it doesn't back out. And now it's time to do the drum brakes. Alright, so we got the drum brakes on and ready to go. All the springs are in there. We got new hardware because we didn't realize, well, we didn't know whether or not the old hardware was still going to be good, but just by looking at it, there's a lot of rust on it, and it's just better to have new stuff rather than use old crusty stuff like this. It was actually missing 2 of these, so I'm glad I got a new kit. Everything is there, color coded, beautiful, and now we have to adjust it. And that is how you do an axle swap on an Impreza OBS. Both sides are done, everything looks good to go. I'm gonna take it for a test drive.